Welcome back, my rogues. Today's question is, police officers of Reddit, was there ever an incident where you had to arrest a close friend of yours? If so, what happened and did it affect your relationship with that person? Hope you enjoy, and check me out on Instagram. A buddy of mine's dad is a cop who rotates from being on the streets giving out tickets and making arrests, to working inside the speedometer monitoring office. I don't know what it's officially called anyways. His son just had a bad breakup and was speeding home, not paying attention to the camera until it was too late. His dad saw the footage, recognized the car, and processed the ticket just like he would for anyone else. I actually remember sitting with both of them during a game night the week the son got the ticket in the mail, and he joked about his dad taking care of it, to which his dad simply said, "No, we caught you fair and square." It didn't happen to me, but my uncle arrested his best friend because he asked my uncle to transport cocaine for him since nobody would suspect a police officer. He ended up crying and apologizing but still went to jail. Not police, but my bill as a parking attendant gave my mother a parking ticket. On Christmas Eve, when she was picking up his present for my sister, he got toast for Christmas dinner. When I first started inland, my trainer encouraged me to get used to navigating our computer system. So I looked up some of my family members. I discovered that my uncle had an active failure to appear to court warrant for, and I shit you not, operating a junkyard without a permit. He ran a used car lot and dabbled in parting out cars. So technically accurate. I let him know about it for his own awareness, and he elected to do the right thing. He contacted a bondsman and turned himself into jail to be processed and get it cleared up. He just happened to choose a night to turn himself in that I was working. And as a trainee, it was my expectation to do all path searches to gain more experience at doing it right. My trainer took pity on me and didn't actually make me arrest and search my uncle. But I should have. Years later, before I left the career, I would have done it in a heartbeat without thinking twice, because it was my job. But I was squeamish at the time due to being so new. X200B. I also had to search and process one of my soldiers who got himself into trouble, Army reservist. I was his section sergeant. I was extra pissed at him though, because his drunk ass broke my several-month streak of not needing to use physical force on anyone. And this was after he'd already been tasered by the arresting officers. Had to arrest my sister for DUI. I was the only cop in a small town and she wrapped her car around a tree and was hammered. On the one hand it sucked, but on the other it was an easy decision because being a family member doesn't excuse dangerous and illegal behavior. I had a client that I had reason to believe was going to be indicted due to an investigation of a marijuana distribution ring. I had already called the sheriff's department and told the warrants division to give me a call, and I would make my client available if he got charged. They called me after the grand jury handed down the indictments, and I arranged to have a deputy meet us at the magistrate's office so that he could be arrested and booked. We get there and the deputy is his best friend from high school. They were just sort of grinning at each other as my client was searched and handcuffed. The deputy asked him if he wanted to talk to one of their narcotics guys. My client is like, "Yeah, right," and the deputy says something like, "I knew you wouldn't but had to ask." Both of them laughing. When we got in front of the magistrate, the deputy emphasized how cooperative he had been and that he had turned himself in. So the magistrate released him on an unsecured bond. Sand is the herpes of the beach, especially if you have small children. This is a main factor in why small-town cops retire. They get tired of arresting people they know. I became friends with the cop who arrested me for DUI. I wasn't mad at him because I 100% deserved it. When I went to court, another friend was the bailiff. My boss was the attorney in the next case, and the judge was my business law professor I had at the time. Uncle arrested me for underage driving and I was fined a slap on the wrist compared to what would have happened to others. My cousin called me from a traffic stop once. His license was suspended as fuck for non-stop DUIs going back years. He was drunk this time, too, plus some cocaine besides. I did talk to the cop, but only to make sure he wasn't going to do my cousin any favors. He got work release, escaped to get fucked up, and wound up back in prison. He bled my uncle for cash while he was inside, claiming he had gambling debts that would get him killed, likely contributing to my uncle's heart attack. When he got out, he tried to get shitty about me not covering for him. I told him he'll probably live longer in prison and he needed to quit smoking crack. I love him, but he is a stupid motherfucker. When I was 17, my uncle arrested me for underage drinking. Slap on the wrist, sent to drunk tank for about 45 minutes until my mum picked me up. Didn't even search me or check my purse. I had cigarettes and weed in it. Oof. Obligatory not me, but my father was the sergeant and lead juvenile officer of my hometown growing up. He had to arrest my brother for stealing when we were in high school. My brother had been stealing money from the band room that was received from students for all replacement reeds, instrument screws, etc. Our band teacher could not figure out who was doing it, but he suspected my brother. The big instrumental solo competition was coming around and suddenly all the students' admission money went missing. So my teacher set up a camera in his office and put away in the usual spot money that had been collected that day. Sure enough, my brother comes in and doesn't hesitate going to the spot where the money is hidden and takes it. Later that day I see my dad enter the school on his day off in civilian clothes. Watch him not even acknowledge me and head straight for the principal's office. He had to not only read him his rights, but cuff him and put him in the cruiser that one of the officers then took him to the police station to be processed. Ultimately the school dropped the charges, but damn if that wasn't the coldest family dinner. Not me, but a friend is a fire warden Leo in our state. His father was illegally burning pressure-treated wood in a burn barrel. Can't burn pressure-treated wood or use a burn barrel on a day where open burning was suspended because of the fire danger. He told him about his intent to burn the day prior, to which my friend informed him it's illegal and he will get a ticket for that. His father said that the town doesn't enforce the local fire laws and that the state won't care, even knowing that his son works for the state and very much does care. My friend pulls up the next day, once again tries to explain it, and his dad says something along the lines of, if you are really trying to be one of those kinds of asshole cops, write me a damn ticket for this little fire. So my friend writes the ticket and takes a picture of the fire in case his dad tries to fight it. This little fire was about 10 feet tall, in a burn barrel, on a day that you couldn't legally burning pressure-treated wood. They don't talk much and his dad is an asshole, so good riddance. Not a cop that have interviewed before. This is a common question during the interview process. If you pulled your mother over for speeding, would you write her a ticket? Truthfully, there is no right answer. They want you to be able to explain and back up whatever answer you give. I think it was Baltimore. They have traffic cops that are different than regular cops. Regular cops were parking their cop cars all over in and around the precinct and in illegal spots on the streets. Somebody fired up a local politician who got the parking ticket cops to ticket every single illegal cop car. It wound up being an ugly pissing contest, and I think the tickets were later dropped. But it was to make a point about illegal parking and being above the law. My ex-girlfriend's friend blew an officer to get out of a DWI. He let her go. At least he kept his end of the bargain. I used to know a guy who was in charge of a small village police station in a rural English village. I won't be too specific for privacy reasons. Anyway, his son was one of the constables working underneath him, but despite this he would often get himself into situations where he would break the law. Nothing that was a huge deal, so he would handle the situation himself to sweep it under the carpet. And the rest of the station would just go along with it. Anyway, this was all fine until an officer was transferred from London. He had a very different way of working and was a lot stricter with the law. On his first day there, he actually arrested the son and put him in a cell for the night. This forced his dad to have to take more drastic measures. I don't want to go into detail, but let's just say they weren't short on Chunky Monkey for the next month. DIDNT happened to me, but my best friend and I went to the same middle school, and my best friend had an older brother. His older brother is a cop and is a cop in the same town as the middle is in. So my friend's brother pulls over a car for a routine speeding. Turns out it's my teacher. My friend's brother and the teacher knew each other, so she got left off on a warning. Man oh man, was that an awkward conversation in class the next day. I'm not a police officer, but I once had to fight my brother to the death on top of a busted up Metal Gear while we were both shirtless. My sister is a police officer, and caught mum speeding. Living in a pretty small town, most of the people knew each other, so my sis had to give my mum a ticket just so people wouldn't complain about it. I DK how fair it was. But the funny thing is that mum was speeding cause she thought I had a party at our house, even though I'm a lazy-ass introvert. My wife works with a lady that's married to a cop who's notorious for trapping people in innocent conversations for doing illegal things. I just mean random people at dinner parties. Oh, you brought back whiskey from one place to another? Here's why that's illegal. Be scared of me. I fucking hate this guy. Typical mustache. Loud. Overtly racist piece of sunburn. Oh yes. Buckle up. This is fucked up. Had this buddy in high school. We were close friends and we smoked weed from time to time. He was my source. He told me all he wanted to do was smoke weed every day. Didn't care about anything else. He just wanted to make enough money to have an apartment and buy weed. That was really when we started to split ways. Sure, smoking weed is fun, but not that fun lol. After military service, I worked for my hometown local PD. At the time I was in the drug unit. Now understand, we didn't give a shit about weed unless it was massive amounts. And even then, there were no legal states and most of it came from Mexico. Go high enough up the chain we couldn't go any further as cartels were unreachable and didn't snitch. We were after cartel meth, which plagued our town. Anyway, I get a call from a patrol at like 0200 wanting me to come to a scene of a death investigation because one of the guys there was uncooperative with the investigation in the place reeked of weed. I arrive and you guessed it, my old stoner buddy was uncooperative. Long story short, his girlfriend had some terrible disease and died shortly after they had done some drugs. Can't remember what it was. In the house was a safe, and on top of it was scales with meth residue and baggies and balloons. I wrote the search warrant and in the safe was his weed, some shrooms, heroin, meth, LSD on blotter paper, a journal with names and amounts, and some money wrapped in dryer sheets. We both just looked at each other and did the silent head nod. A couple days later he asked to see me in the jail. I didn't know what to expect because I knew he wasn't going to snitch his sources. He said, Rhino 148, I just want you to know that I'm glad it was you and I won't tell us all about what the weed we smoked. He was dead serious and in all honesty, I don't think he was trying to jam me up to help his situation. I said thanks but everything he said was recorded by the jail and he was mind blown that my employers know my drug use history, polygraph results and was still a cop. He served a little under 2 years and was out and got jammed up again. Several years later he is still on the run with a $500,000 warrant. I was a cop for 13 years. Not a cop-related story. In 10th grade there was a kid who sat behind me in English class. He was 17 or 18 and had failed so much he was still a sophomore. Long story short, we didn't get along and he tried to fight me on the middle of class once. I'm also fairly certain he stole a portable CD player as bought a week prior on another occasion. Fast forward 6 years and him working at a halfway house for the DCC. Guess who shows up? He definitely recognized me and I did his intake. I'd like to pretend there's more to the story but the truth is he was just a screw-up. That being said, screw-ups still get older and wiser. He never apologized but he also didn't cause problems. He did his time and moved on. As far as I know, HES remained out of the system. Here's hoping sobriety and clean living helped him turn his life around. My dad is retired now but back when he was a cop he'd purposely get pulled over to prank his co-workers. It basically could only happen if he was in a car they didn't recognize. Like if he borrowed one or we got a new one. If he saw a squad, he'd weave a little in his lane so they'd think he could be drunk driving. They'd pull him over and as they approached the car he'd crank the radio. They'd always pause like, what fresh hell is this idiot going to be? Then when they got to the window and saw it was him everyone got a good laugh. A few times, the whole family was in the car when he did it and my mum was muttering obscenities under her breath the whole time because she didn't approve. Ooh, I can finally contribute to one of these. Back in the day my uncle was a cop and my dad loved to party. One day my dad was drunk at a party and got into a fight. When the call came over the radio my uncle responded not knowing it was my dad. Apparently my dad didn't take his brother serious when he tried to calm things down. And got himself tasered along with a night in jail for disorderly conduct. Another cop would have probably charged him for assault on an officer. Then again, he probably wouldn't have assaulted any other cop. Well, until he did 6 years later. Didn't happen to me, but to my cousin. The town, small town. Everyone knows everyone. My cousin, who we will call Steve, was a bit of a troublemaker in high school. Nothing super serious like drugs or anything. But once him and his friends snuck onto school property and chopped down the apple tree. This tree was still producing fruit, and the school would use those apples as lunch selections, and had done so for years. When this happened, it was huge news. He also did a few other things. So basically, he was just in trouble more often than not. After high school, however, he turned a new leaf. Mostly because of his extreme social anxiety disorder he suffered from. Enter a classmate, who we will call John. John was very good friends with Steve's older brother in high school. After high school, John joined the military, and when he got out, he came home and became a police officer. John then spent most of the next 2 years basically stalking Steve. He would park his police vehicle outside of Steve's house, and just watch the house to see if he could catch Steve doing anything illegal. Everyone knew about it, but since it was such a small town, nobody ever really did anything about it. One day, Steve was persuaded to join some of his co-workers for some beers after work. Drinking wasn't out of the ordinary for Steve. But drinking at the bar was very unusual for him again. Social anxiety. Steve drove himself home drunk. Stories differ from this point, as some say John was waiting outside the bar for Steve. Others say he was waiting outside Steve's house. But the end result is that John pulled Steve over, arrested him for DUI, and had the drug dogs in the county come and tear his vehicle apart looking for drugs. There were none, because Steve doesn't do drugs. Shortly after, John quit being a cop, and Steve to this day won't leave his house outside of going to work. He now has a job on his family farm, working for his brother, so he has zero contact with anyone that is not immediate family. He won't even come to our family Xmas Thanksgiving celebrations, so basically, John is just a pure asshole looking to make someone's life even worse than it already was. John and Steve's older brother are no longer friends, and John has moved out of the area as everyone now hates him. This doesn't really answer the question, but my dad was a police officer and my mum was a teacher at my high school. My dad would come hang out in her classroom, and got to know some of the kids pretty well. They would often recruit him to pull pranks and help ask people to prom. Friend told me a story of a friend of his family who was a Texas state trooper. On a day when he had another trooper riding with him doing an audit on his performance. These guys operate alone, on lonely sections of road, so it is important that they don't get relaxed. So they get tested. Speeder comes by and doesn't check up at all. Trooper friend just shrinks in his seat, sweating. The auditor trooper says, "I think you ought to go get that one." It was a little more than a suggestion, based on rank, so the trooper soon finds himself asking a rather irate wife why she was speeding down this highway when he told her this morning he would be out here with an auditor. Legend is he wrote the ticket. The auditor didn't find out till later who she was. To him it was just another irate driver being handled calmly by the trooper. Well, I was heading home when I saw a man in dress all black snooping around my house. I took out my gun and flashlight and pointed it at him. He immediately put his hands up and I told him to turn around slowly. It was my friend from high school, Tom. He suddenly pulls out a gun and opens fire. I fire back and accidentally hit him in a critical spot. I held him in my arms as he spoke his last words. "You should have tagged this as serious." Everyone here at DIDNT happened to me, but I know a guy that. My late uncle was a police officer and my mum used to tell me how anytime she would get pulled over, they would call him to the scene, just so he could joyfully give his little sister a ticket. That is if he wasn't the one pulling her over. He used to love pulling her over for no reason, just to fuck with her. He was actually a really good guy, rode his Harley to the LCS to play D&D on the weekends. He unfortunately suffered a heart attack while riding and died because he didn't have helmet on. No helmet laws in FL at the time. I had to arrest the father of two of my co-workers. He choked the hell out of his daughter one drunken holiday and none of the other guys wanted to touch it. I locked him up, charged him accordingly and kept it professional. It was awkward for a little while but then things returned to normal and everyone respected that it was the right thing to do. A year or two later the hot daughter took me home from the bar. Not sure if the two were related but 10-10 would lock dad up again. Just a warning, there are no actual police officer in this thread. Unfortunately, this has happened. Back in high school I had a friend that I would hang out with and skip classes with almost every week. We were so close it was amazing. We had the best of times together. But there was a problem. My friend, let's call him K, had grown up in an abusive home and was poor to the point he had to steal clothes and food. I didn't know that at the time and not for a very long time until after I became an officer. We would still talk at least once a week after I got my job. Then one day I got a call of a robbery downtown and that 3 victims were shot. 2 of which dead. I get there and there is a man with a ski mask on pointing a shotgun at the other officers on duty. To the right I see tons of blood and a body. I somehow managed to sneak around to behind the robber and tackle him and remove the gun from his hands. I then pulled his mask off, only to reveal K. It was a hard time for me to put him into cuffs. I will never forget the look on his face when I said, "K, is that you?" It was a mix of sadness and surprised. He's in jail now on 2 counts of murder. As for me, I still think about him every day. This didn't happen to me, but it involved the cheerleading squad, 10 hamsters and an illegally modified assault-style weapon. Click here to find out what happened next. A few years ago the local police station with the help of the county and state did a prostitution sting. Local officer ended up arresting his wife. A ticket, not an arrest, but my mother was law enforcement and had another officer pull my sister over and give her a ticket. For failure to call your mother, she called. My ex-girlfriend father arrested me for having drugs in my car. But the fact, I have never taken drugs in my life and have no clue how 25 grams of cocaine found its way in my car's trunk. I know a cop who caught his own brother with weed. He ended up calling his lieutenant for advice and they sent another officer to take care of it so there wouldn't be any wires. He had a pretty big stash as well. In the end, he just had to do a diversion course as he was only 18. As far as the relationship goes, it was strained for a while to say the least. Oh, I can contribute. Not me but my buddy. He was previously United States Marine, and while he was stationed overseas in 2016, his then wife cheated on him multiple times. When my buddy got home he learned what was going on and left her. Luckily there were no kids in the picture so it was an easy split. Anyways, after he got out of the Marines, he became a cop and worked our local jail. One day while he was on shift, his ex-wife was brought in under a DUI charge. He said the look on her face was absolutely priceless and he did absolutely nothing to help her out of the mess. Not a police officer but I knew a guy once that commented on a thread similar to this once. My neighbor is the sheriff around here, and I'm good friends with him. I remember going to see my GF and I was speeding. He pulled me over and ticketed me. I haven't mowed his yard yet. This was a problem in Ireland. Many local police guarda is what we call them here would stop people on the road to check them for insurance or if they were speeding, etc. And cause they were local and knew them they all let them off and this kept happening until there was a whistleblower in the force who went through shit for it for years by other guarda until it was proven he was right and he received compensation for the amount of shit he was put through for doing his job. Think there was a two-part documentary about the whole incident on our national broadcaster RTI. Probably didn't do the story justice by explaining it too well. I forget a lot of the details. One day I was patrolling around 2 AM, and I saw my good friend, let's call he Brian. Brian was sitting on the bench looking at the ground, hiding his hand in his shirt. He didn't know there was a patrol car and then there was a young lady who seemed to have come out of work. She was walking down the street, so Brian goes to her, and I had to act quickly to try Brian does not harm her or steal anything. I ran to help the woman and he saw me. After that he started to tell me that I did not arrest him but that was my job. In the end I arrested him and I never spoke to him again. Nor he to me. Brian already had problems with some reports of robberies before him Spanish, so him not so good or English. Sorry for that. When I was military police I had to write myself a ticket for hitting a light with the 2-week-old police cruiser. Chief was not happy. My son got caught selling weed at his high school. The officer on duty at the school arrested him. When my son went to court this same officer was there. My son hugged him. Years later they will run into each other and it is always a warm welcome from both sides. This arrest was a turning point for my son to clean up his act. Where the law enforcement friends of Ed Kemper at.
Hope you liked this video. Stay frosty my rebels.